Yeah, we were right there.
Yep.
Vaccines are destroying the lives of countless children.
We're tracking down the leaders of a movement.
Vaccines cause autism.
Pushing fear.
We do not want our children experimented upon.
And misinformation. We're in Washington, D.C., and we're waiting outside a big VIP event tonight with the world's biggest anti-vax leaders.
Rolling.
They don't trust mainstream media, so we're sending producers in with hidden cameras, posing as activists to expose the movement's inner workings. We're gonna get to the real heart of this and why they push this anti-vax message.
We must not allow forced injections into the human body.
The movement's leaders are hard to miss. We spot three of the biggest. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., JFK's nephew and head of a nonprofit that funded anti-vax ads like this. Andrew Wakefield, the disgraced physician whose bogus study famously linked vaccines to autism. Del Bigtree, a controversial filmmaker, speaker, and host. He spent much of his career defending Wakefield.
He gave up on saving his own ass and his own career to save children.
And they're treated like rock stars.
Is this a lineup?
Here.
Everywhere you go, there's a line.
Conversations are flowing. There are even anti-vaxxers from Canada.
Canadians are so apathetic. We need to be more willing to engage.
That's what we're trying
in a more radical way.
Other activists quick to share their strategies.
Keep their heads spinning. They would love to be able to predict what we have going on.
You can't search our name and it won't come up. We're secret.
Secret, because openly anti-vax groups could get flagged on social media. So they use crafty names.
We need to not put vaccine even in the name whatsoever. So informed consent. And then the other Virginia one is Virginians for Medical Freedom.
Thanks for the tips.
Yeah.
Back in Canada. So we're just outside Ottawa, and we're about to meet two moms who are sisters, and they have a really unique story to tell about being vaccine hesitant.
This one is someone else's.
Megan is a mother of 3.
Okay, everybody, we need to wash some hands.
Tara, a mother of 10. They know all too well how convincing anti-vax messaging can be.
With really compelling headlines like, "My child was never the same again."
Lots of regression, lots of death, lots of babies dying. That kind of thing is really, really scary.
When they see posts like this, Megan and Tara begin to doubt.
I didn't want them to be the tiny percentage to be injured by a vaccine. I just kind of froze in fear and didn't make any decision at all.
But when they do more digging, they have trouble verifying the claims.
I thought there was this wealth of well-documented, well-referenced, like incontrovertible evidence that all the claims that vaccines are bad for you. All this smoke, where's the fire? I was pissed.
They finally decide to vaccinate, but it's too late.
We had made the decision to vaccinate them, and the reason that we didn't make the appointment is because they were coughing and they were sick.
And it was the whooping cough.
Thousands of children died every year before the vaccine existed, and kids who get it today can still die from it. These are Tara's kids, all infected. Megan's 3 unvaccinated kids end up sick too. They're put into quarantine.
Like, my youngest was a year old, and he was born premature. So had that happened a year earlier, he could have died.
I cannot even explain, like, the self-recrimination and the guilt and the fear. I was like, I did that. We're vulnerable to misinformation because we so dearly want to do the right thing.
The kind of messaging Tara and Megan fell for, is exactly what we're hearing at this anti-vax rally in Washington.
It's the most significant medical issue in society today is the injury from vaccinations.
This is a war for our children. This is a war for their minds, for their bodies.
With many making false claims about the harm vaccines can cause.
I know that it can cause allergies, autoimmune issues.
There's spectrum autisms.
Eczema, seizures. These are things that are affecting children.
There's no evidence to support any of the concerns.
Timothy Caulfield, public health expert and author of a book debunking vaccine myths.
And not only is this isn't even speculative, this is what the science says.
Let's go through some of the claims. Allergies?
No evidence to support it.
Autoimmune disease?
But no evidence.
What about seizures?
There are rare risks where kids do have seizures. You have to remember that kids can get that kind of seizure from a variety of ailments.
Fact, side effects are very rare. For every 1 million vaccinations, only 1 to 2 severe allergic reactions. Despite these stats, nearly half of Canadians have concerns about vaccine safety. And according to the World Health Organization, that's known as vaccine hesitancy, a top global health threat.
You have, on the one side, the hardcore anti-vaxxers. Then you have the vaccination hesitant. These are people that are uncertain about whether they should get their kids vaccinated. And often these are just people who are trying to do what's best for their kids.
Why do you think vaccine hesitancy is so common?
I think it's common because, unfortunately, the anti-vax messaging is working.
Several studies, including this one, that had hundreds of thousands of kids, showed no link between the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine, known as MMR, and autism. Yet it's the biggest myth that persists, and it can be traced back to this study, with only 12 children. The study linking MMR and autism is a sham?
It is a sham. It is, and it's been debunked. It was shown to be completely fraudulent.
Yet Wakefield, Kennedy Jr., and Big Tree still push this lie, and it's led to outbreaks around the world. In Samoa, authorities recently arrested an anti-vaxxer for spreading misinformation after a measles epidemic. More than 80 people died, almost all of them children.
It's caused a huge amount of harm. We've seen measles outbreaks happen all over the world, right? And it's largely, not entirely, but largely because of the spread of misinformation.
Back on Hidden Camera, we want to learn more about their tactics, the business behind their message.
Oh, it's Andrew Wakefield. Do you ever come to Canada much, or? Yeah, I'm happy to come back to Canada. I love it. Yeah, I love Canadians. So. Yeah. Hi, Del. Eric, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, too.
What's it going to take to get you to Canada?
Yeah, I love Canada. You guys, it's really important up there.
Do you have fees or anything like that?
Yeah, I do have fees.
We find out Big Tree and Wakefield charge thousands of dollars to speak at events, and they've raised millions through nonprofits to fund their cause.
My name's Eric. I'm from Canada.
Oh, nice to meet you.
Others have more creative ways of fundraising. This is James Lyons Weiler. He runs a science-based nonprofit. He says he's not an activist, even though he holds views like this.
Vaccines can and do cause autism in some people.
How does he raise his money?
So if we wanted to bring you to Vancouver, what is it going to cost you? Should we fly you out?
I don't charge.
You don't charge? Great.
Now, I can't. That would make me a lobbyist.
Right.
Make me an international lobbyist.
Yeah.
He wants to be seen as a scientist, so he proposes a workaround.
So what I would rather do is I'd do a science day the day before.
What does that mean?
I would run an event where you are.
You'd run an event where
I would run an event where you are, charge admission as through my website.
So it's like a promo thing for you, a marketing thing for you. You can get the word out for you. That way it's not a quid pro quo, I guess. Yeah. That's a dirty word nowadays.
I don't. Listen, if the worst thing I'm doing is talking with people about aluminum accumulation trends in children from vaccines.
We're told for an event with 400 people, it'll cost $10,000.
They must be aware of this science, and this is a way of creating celebrity. This is a way of creating demand. This is a way of making a living.
James tells us later over email that it's not unexpected he gets paid for his services. He says hosting an event comes with costs. But in Washington, he offers one piece of advice for free.
Do you have any advice? Let's just keep chipping away at policy.
Keep their heads spinning. They would love to be able to predict what we have going on.
What's going on? Challenge mandatory vaccination policies, but they call it medical freedom.
The movement is proactively securing beachheads to promote medical freedom, to promote exemptions where they don't exist.
It's so cynical, I didn't expect them to be so explicit about it. They have a very particular agenda. I think part of it is creating fear.
How does hearing these claims over and over again affect our decision-making?
Just being exposed to this information makes it seem more believable and invites a little bit of doubt, which creates hesitancy.
We're putting that to the test. With a social experiment showing how easily misinformation influences the decisions we make. Hi, everyone. I'm Asha Tomlinson with CBC Marketplace. This group thinks they're here for a forum about fake news. We want you to feel okay in front of the cameras, and so what we're gonna do is a few warm-up exercises. But what they don't know, these warm-up exercises are really a series of tests created with the help of our experts. Timothy Caulfield and Olivier Drouin, a pediatrician who has a background in behavioral science.
I think it's gonna be fascinating.
They're in another room watching and analyzing everything live. Welcome to the Fake News Forum. This is your marketplace. Vaccine fears are growing. The anti-vax message is working. We want to show you why it's so easy to fall for fake news about vaccine dangers. Welcome to the Fake News Forum. We've brought in 8 media-savvy people. 2 of them happen to have doubts about vaccines. Parents like Elka.
What if I take the vaccination and something happened to me?
And Valerie. She's heard all sorts of anti-vax claims.
Robert Kennedy Jr. has a very compelling video.
It is the most potent neurotoxin known to man that is not radioactive.
They're here for what they think is a forum on fake news, but they're actually part of a social experiment that our experts are secretly watching. Our first experiment, something called identifiable victim bias. Anti-vaxxers will often focus on one powerful story about a child who they say was harmed by a vaccine.
I think almost everyone knows someone that has had a kid with an adverse reaction.
I personally have not experienced that with my kids, but I know people that have.
You know, most people who come with some question or worries about vaccination, they always start with like the story of somebody.
To test that, we present the group with 2 fictional causes with 2 very different stories, and we give them a pouch of money. There are 1 of 2 causes that you can donate $5 to. This is Milo the dog. His owner was attacked by another dog, and Milo courageously jumped in, protected his owner, but suffered very serious injuries. The surgery is gonna cost upwards of $1,500. Let's see how this next story compares. This is the Toronto Dog Society. Now, they help stray dogs and troubled dogs find shelter. This cause helps many more dogs, not just one, but it's harder to relate to. The costs are growing, and they just can't keep up. Remember, people tend to be drawn to someone's story over bigger causes.
Okay, here we go. With the Dog Society, I would have guessed it. Yeah.
Doesn't work for Elka. Next up.
Now this guy, Shelter.
Oh! Results of our first bias test? 50% voted for Milo the dog.
With something like vaccines, you really only need 20, 30% to be swayed by this information to create a serious problem.
Now we're testing for something called omission bias, our tendency to do nothing when faced with tough choices. Parents won't vaccinate because they don't want to be responsible for harming their child.
It's so dangerous to vaccinate. We're just not going to do it.
To test this bias, we pull them aside and give them a choice. We'll take $50 from one person, or they can choose to take $40 from someone else. Choosing does less harm, but the bias suggests most people will do nothing and let us take $50 from someone else.
If you just let it happen, then it feels more natural, and so people feel less responsible.
And so it begins. What will Amit do?
I can do that.
Okay, so he's taking on himself.
Is that the case for the others? Let's see what Valerie does.
She's uncertain.
Yeah.
I can't do that. $40. I can't do
that. Yeah, she said, I cannot do that. I cannot pick one person. Yeah.
Classic. She doesn't want to take the action.
Turns out, most of the people don't want to take the money. They let us do it. You decide.
Holy cow. This is a really strong example of the omission bias.
Now we're testing for probability neglect. You have far greater risk of getting a brain infection from the measles than suffering a serious side effect from the vaccine. But those odds mean nothing when you're afraid.
It was terrifying. Oh my gosh, I hope they're not the, one in a gazillion who is gonna have some horrific reaction.
To test this, we need a terrifying scenario our guests will want to avoid.
Oh, here we go.
3, 2, 1.
Voila.
Oh,
no.
The spider represents every parent's nightmare, that your child will be harmed by a vaccine. So gang, if we draw a red ball, it means you have to hold the spider.
Uh-oh. Red ball equals spider. Some people are not excited about red balls.
The only way to avoid drawing the red ball is to pay up. But don't you need to find out what your chances are before giving away your money? We see quickly our guests never ask.
Those that are afraid, they haven't asked about what was the probability.
They just want to avoid it.
Yeah.
What's Charmin going to do? We can take out the red balls for you if you give us some money.
She's pondering.
Which means you're safe.
all right.
We don't have to draw.
Thank you.
She looks pretty pleased with the result, right? Yeah.
Those that are terrified pay up and never ask their odds. Ready?
Yeah.
Red ball.
Okay.
Then there's Martin. The test doesn't work on him because he loves spiders.
What a little princess.
Time for the big reveal. Well, there's more than meets the eye to this fake news forum. Okay, come on out, guys. This has been a CBC experiment. Our experts have been watching this whole time and analyzing your decisions.
Oh, great.
We're working on a story about vaccinations and the anti-vaccination messaging.
And I think, there's a lot of those different hidden forces that we don't necessarily think about or realize that comes into play when we make decisions.
It's actually very hard to combat cognitive biases, even when you're aware of them.
So how have these experiments impacted our guests?
I did not expect to be so manipulated today. So it was extremely enlightening to me that I've got to step it up a notch and be more critical.
What about Elka? Remember, she had real concerns about vaccine safety.
I'm very glad that I was a part of it, and definitely I'm going to take the shots now.
Elka decides to start vaccinating.
I will make sure my kids also take it, and whoever doesn't want to, I'll try to motivate. Like I got motivated, so yes, right away I'm going to the clinic.
This is your marketplace. We've gone undercover with the world's biggest anti-vaxxers. Now we're waiting outside a VIP event. We're hoping to confront one of the movement's leaders. As the event ends,
hi, I'm with CBC Television in Canada.
We catch up with Del Bigtree. You're considered a leader in this movement. Why do you believe so much in it?
Every day someone recognizes my child's injured, or my cousin, I watched their child regress into autism.
Recognize that? Identifiable victim bias. With all due respect, there are multiple studies with hundreds of thousands of subjects. That there was one in 2016 and one in 2019.
That said what?
Hundreds of thousands of subjects that said there's no link between the MMR vaccine and autism.
The Denmark study.
Are they untrue?
It's bad science. Most of it's being funded by people who make money off of selling vaccines.
Not true. Many patents for childhood vaccines have expired and are not a big moneymaker for drug companies.
Here's the point. I want my children to get the measles. The people who get the measles will have lifelong immunity for life.
But what about the 140,000 people who died of measles in 2018? And so they should ignore the measles outbreak that have been, and it is due to a drop in vaccinations.
That's not true.
Come on. I just want you to speak to parents who are vaccine hesitant, who are really worried about misinformation.
Yes.
And what do you say to them?
Do your own research.
And if they do their research and they're still not sure?
That's what I would say. Don't do anything you're not sure about.
Hear that? He's saying do nothing. That's omission bias. These parents did that, and they learned the hard way.
My advice to vaccine hesitant parents would be to completely understand how you feel.
Get informed about the real risks of these actual preventable diseases, not just get scared into a bunch of misinformation.